Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Regional Community Coalition all-member call. And give everybody kind of a second to finish loading in and get themselves muted and whatnot. Mary, if you want to jump to the next screen. If you could just make sure that all of your microphones are muted. Please enter in any questions that you may have in the chat box. And we want to hear from you. So please also share any experiences or any comments, questions, concerns, anything in the chat box. These calls are for you. So we want to hear from you. Go ahead, Mary. All right. So also in the chat, if we could get your name, your organization, your coalition name, if you know it, along with your location and any activities or updates that you'd like to share with the group. Jessica, you won. I think you're the first one that I saw come through. Go ahead, Mary. And Kyla, I'm going to have you jump in on here for me on these ones. You're still there.
Sorry, I was typing in my my introduction. So thank you, Jamie. Kyla Newland here in Alaska. I'm a Mountain Pacific account manager, and I do support several coalitions across Alaska. So I'm just going to kind of give us our baseline, kind of what we do at all of our meetings, making sure that folks are getting what they need from us. If there's additional things that you need quality improvement wise, please reach out to us either via chat or to the account manager that you work with in any of your states. And if there's new folks in your coalitions, please send those our way as well, and we can update our listservs and our contact list so that we make sure everybody's included. And then if there are partners that you think need to be added to coalitions. So in Alaska, we're continually kind of finding new partners for our Take Heart in Diabetes Coalition as we see turnover with staff and things. So definitely send those our way. Or if there's folks that you want, that you think we might be able to assist, send them our way and we can definitely connect with them. And then, as you know, we have certain metrics and data that we report to CMS. So if there's specific things, and I will talk about the 5 areas that of focus in our contract on the next slide, definitely let us know if you need additional support. And then we are getting to the end of this contract, and we do have, you can still sign up with participation agreements. We can still share data with you under our current initiatives, which I said will be on our next slide. And our next call on October 22nd, we are hoping to have more information on the direction in which CMS is going to head. A lot of the initiatives will be the same, but we might see some changes, additions, and a little bit of shifting in what we'll be focusing on. So more to come on that. We can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, these are the 5 goals that are included in our contract currently. They're pretty broad. Looking at adverse drug events, we look at those related to opioids, but we also look at 2 other drug classes, the anticoagulants and diabetes medications, chronic disease management. We look at metrics related to diabetes, blood pressure, cardiac rehab, care coordination, kind of very general term that everyone's probably familiar with. Just looking at all care settings and making sure that patients are getting the best quality care as they transition across the healthcare system. We can support you in developing or implementing emergency preparedness plans. I think most people have those at this point, just given the last few years, but we can also assist with that. And then we do a lot of education related to immunizations and also supporting any immunization task forces or coalitions that are existent in all of our states. We can go to the next slide.
All right. And then, go ahead, Kyla.
I can let you take over if you want, Jamie.
Whichever. I'm so new with Mountain Pacific. We are going to be having Ray kind of come on and talk about admissions and readmissions. And Kyla will be back to talk about fall vaccine recommendations. There's been some updates and changes, so she's going to make sure that you guys have all the updated information that you will need. And a outside guest, we will have a couple representatives from Vivint Health. So we'll have Tom Ahrens, who's actually the founder of Vivint Health, and Natasha Dickinson to talk about sepsis and different things to look for and what sepsis actually, what it breaks down as. Mary, if you want to jump to the next screen. I'm going to introduce you now to Ray Tupling. He is our analytic team lead, and Ray, the screen is yours.
All right, thank you, Brun. I'll share my screen. And as Jamie said, I'm going to be looking at some admissions and readmissions data. So bear with me while I get my screen up here. But what we're going to be looking at is admissions and readmissions data specific to the Medicare beneficiary population that we cover throughout our 4 states, which include Alaska, Hawaii, Montana, Wyoming, and the Pacific Islands. So starting off with, we'll just look at our admissions rate per 1,000 beneficiary years. So on that blue line right there, we've got time on the x-axis and the the rate on the y-axis. We're looking at Q1 2020 over here on the left. So we see that massive drop for COVID. And since then, we've had an overall downward trend. If we jump forward to Q1 of 2024, that's the latest data we have available, we've got an admissions rate of about 28 admissions per 1,000 beneficiary years among our Medicare fee-for-service population. Now, again, that's across all those 4 states in the Pacific Islands. We'll hone in on Alaska first. So in Alaska, unfortunately, from Q4 2023 to Q1 2024, our admissions rate has gone up a little bit. It went from about nearly 31 admissions per 1,000 beneficiary years to currently almost 33. In Hawaii, our recent trends have also been up over the last quarter. Through March, again, this would be through March 31st to 2024. It's at nearly 30 admissions per 1,000 beneficiary years in Hawaii. And in Montana, Montana's been performing extremely well with admissions and readmissions. That nice downward trend all the way from Q1 2020 continuing through to Q1 of 2024. Montana's at about 27.6 admissions per 1,000 beneficiary years. And finally, Wyoming, unfortunately, is leading the way in the admissions rate. But that being said, it's sitting at about 31.75 admissions per 1,000 beneficiary years. Now, we've seen the admissions rate. Let's dive a little bit deeper. Let's take a look at what are the diagnoses that are driving these admissions among our Medicare fee-for-service population. So starting off region-wide, this is going to take, again, the same time period. So our x-axis is exactly the same. And then our y-axis is just going to be counts of admissions broken down by our different categories of diagnoses. So leading the way across the region, that red line indicates the number of hypertension claims out there. So hypertension is our most frequently occurring ICD code that's on Medicare claims, followed by chronic kidney disease, and then diabetes, which rounds out the top 3. In 4th place, we have heart failure. So again, those should be really no surprise to anybody. Those are chronic conditions that tend to stick around a while and are very prevalent throughout the Medicare fee-for-service population. A call out to sepsis, because I know we've got a sepsis presentation later. We've been very consistently having approximately 2,500 or so sepsis admissions every quarter among our fee-for-service beneficiary population. So it is very prevalent, and as you can see, very steady. Anyways, moving on, readmission rates. So this is going to be our 30-day readmission rate among our Medicare fee-for-service population. Again, same time frame, Q1 2020 on the left over to Q1 2024 on the right. And since Q1 of 2020, we've gone from a peak of about 3.1 readmissions per 1,000 beneficiary years, and a nice downward trend to currently 2.34 30-day readmissions per 1,000 beneficiary years. And it's a very nice drop from Q4 2023 to Q1 2024. Diving into the states, in Alaska, we're sitting at just about 2.9 readmissions per 1,000 beneficiary years. And again, a nice drop over the last quarter. In Hawaii, unfortunately, we had a bit of a spike. But that being said, Hawaii is doing quite well relative to the other states, sitting at about 2.5 readmissions per 1,000 beneficiary years. Montana, again, very nice downward trend in Montana. They're leading the pack at roughly 2.1 readmissions per 1,000 beneficiary years. And in Wyoming, unfortunately, they've got the highest readmission rate. They're sitting at about 2.8 readmissions per 1,000 beneficiary years. We'll take a very brief look at our diagnoses behind these readmissions. There probably won't be any groundbreaking information because it's going to be the usual suspects here. But CKD has jumped into first place. That's our most frequently occurring diagnosis code among readmissions, followed by diabetes and hypertension, jockeying for second place, and heart failure in fourth place. You'll notice that heart failure is kind of bumped up against the top three a bit more. And finally, last call out to sepsis. About every quarter, we have nearly 170 every quarter readmission claims with a sepsis code on that. So again, it's very consistent over time. And if there are any questions, feel free to come off mute, put them in chat. If there aren't any, Jamie, I'll hand it back to you.
I do have a question.
Okay.
So I'm Deborah. I'm with the Alzheimer's Association. I would imagine that folks who have dementia are, the caregivers are often using emergency rooms and other, acute response sort of services because, they're reactive instead of, getting that kind of care established early on. What can you tell us about them in this? Because they're not represented in this. Is it just not being tracked, or is it just not, my perception is inaccurate?
Oh, so we track it in a slightly different way. So we put together facility-specific reports. So, just an example, Queens in Hawaii. We do track their ED visits and also break it down by these different diagnosis categories so we can see, what are people coming into the ED for. We typically don't share that in this. We obviously don't share facility-specific information in this setting, but that's typically how we've looked at ED volumes and just ED traffic in general. We tend to go to the facility and then break it down. I hope that answers your question.
If we wanted that kind of data for Wyoming, for example, or Montana, or, any of us that are working collaboratively, is that something we could come to you with and we could access? Yes. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we do that for all the facilities throughout our 4 states and the Pacific Territories. So odds are I've got it sitting in a folder already. So yes, feel free to reach out to me via email. And I'll send you my email in the chat. And anybody else who's interested, if you have a participation agreement signed with us, we can share that data with you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Deborah, what area are you out of?
So I'm the Wyoming Executive Director. And I know you just mentioned Montana, all of us are more regional. So I guess we can figure out together what we all might collectively want to do. Danelle Hubbard is our partner that's assigned specifically to y'all, as she's our Director of Health Systems. You probably need to know, but I think we can all connect. That'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. And Ray, I'll also loop in our Wyoming account managers to help coordinate to get them taken care of too.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Well, if that's it, Jamie, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, Mary, next screen, we have Kyla on next for you to talk about vaccines or fall vaccine recommendations. So Kyla, back to you.
Yes, thank you. I'm back. So in June, the end of June, the ACIP met and put out the recommendations for fall respiratory vaccines. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. We can go to the next slide. So as folks will remember, we had the RSV vaccine. 2 different RSV vaccines were approved. I'm going to say it's about a year ago now. So they did make a change in their recent meeting. They used to recommend this vaccine for everybody 60 and older. And they said that physicians could do that based on shared clinical decision-making and risk factors as to whether those folks should get the vaccine. And it was kind of vague and kind of like, okay, clinical decision-making. Well, then they looked at the data and they looked at the risks, and actually specifically for Guillain-Barré syndrome. And they decided that they were going to change that recommendation. So now they recommend it for patients 75 and older to get 1 single dose of this RSV vaccine, either one of the products that's available. And then in that lower population from 60 to 75, they only recommend it if folks are at increased risk. And so on the next slide, you will see the indications essentially for being at increased risk. So this includes our nursing home residents, long-term care facilities, things like kidney disease, endocrine disorders. So we're talking about people with diabetes, any other kind of endocrine disorders, neurologic disorders, chronic lung conditions, asthma. I would also say if you were a smoker, you'd be included in that higher risk category, folks with any kind of heart disease, blood disorders, or if you're immunocompromised. So these folks should get that vaccine earlier from age 60 to 75. If you've already received an RSV vaccine, that with that initial recommendation, there's no recommendation to get an additional dose. At this time, it's just one and done with the RSV vaccine. And time will tell with that, since it is a newer vaccine, but that is what they currently recommend. So we can go to the next slide. So for influenza, there wasn't a lot of changes as far as the recommendations and who should get the vaccine. Still that everybody 6 months and older should get the vaccine. The only significant update is that they actually went from a quadrivalent vaccine, so it had 4 strains of flu, back to a trivalent vaccine. And we've seen for probably the last 4 or 5 years, we've had that quadrivalent. So we've had 4 strains, but they did remove 1 strain because it wasn't actively circulating anymore. And so this year we're going to have all of our vaccines are going to be trivalent, and they're covering these 3 lineages that are noted here. They did make a slight change to the H3N2 because they did see some shift in that one, but the other 2 are the same, protecting against the same lineage of the H1N1 and the B Victoria. We can go to the next slide. And actually, I'll say one more thing about flu that has not changed since last year. For patients 65 and older, the CDC does still preferentially recommend either the high-dose flu vaccine or the adjuvant flu vaccine, because they saw that did elicit a higher immune response in those patients 65 and older. So it is recommended that if you have that vaccine, you give that preferentially. If you don't have that vaccine, go ahead and just give them whatever you have. And so now moving on to COVID-19. So this is for the fall, basically COVID season, I guess if you want to call it now. They're going to try to make it a yearly vaccine. The actual product has not been approved yet, but they have given recommendations on which strain of COVID they want it to cover. And they're saying that everybody 6 months and older should receive a dose of this vaccine. I will also say they did not make any recommendations on whether you needed to separate out any of these vaccines. You could hypothetically get RSV, flu, and COVID at the same time. And we also do anticipate, and I was hoping for this year, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Potentially next year, there is a vaccine in development that will cover both COVID and flu. You can go to the next slide. Pneumonia, Not a huge change, but there was one new product approved by the FDA. It's a PCV21. And so they basically just added this to the recommendations. As folks probably remember, the latest one that was approved before that and kind of preferentially recommended was the PCV20. So we basically just added one more strain. And so they just added this to their recommendations. I anticipate all the charts that they have on their website will be updated to include the PCV21. I think many of you folks probably utilize those pneumonia vaccine schedules frequently, so we will definitely be distributing that information once it is put out. And I think this is my last slide. And I am going to put in the chat for folks the ACIP meeting. The slides are not posted yet, but that's where they'll be when they're ready. If you want to look at more detail, there's also information on other vaccines that I did not cover today, such as the RSV monoclonal antibody for pediatrics, for pregnant women. There's some other updates on some other vaccines, but I just wanted to focus on those respiratory ones today. So thank you very much.
Kyla, hi Kyla, this is Anita.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. So for the COVID vaccine, any idea when that latest one, the latest updated one will be available? And if I'm due for the COVID vaccine, should I go ahead and get it now or wait till the latest updated one comes out?
I would go ahead and wait until the latest one comes out. And I don't know the anticipated date of release. It just said this fall. So I don't have a hard and fast answer on that.
Okay.
You know, I kind of wonder about that because I know 3 adults within just the last 2 weeks who have gotten COVID, and I haven't been revaccinated in quite some time. So I don't feel compelled to go do it now. I'm getting ready to travel and things like that. I mean, would you agree? Because I mean, the fall is a long time where it seems like there's a, I don't know if it's a surge or if it's just my perception that there's a surge because I know 3 adults who've contracted COVID in the last couple of weeks. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
There has been a surge, absolutely. And I would say if you're not, I guess I should have probably prefaced this. If you're not up to date at this current time, then you could get the current one that's available. We have seen quite a bit of activity up here in Alaska, just in the last several weeks, as you said, even in people that had had a vaccine within the last couple months, which is interesting. So it's not going to hurt you. But there is, I believe, a 4-month waiting period between doses. So that might just push your next vaccine out a little bit further.
And if you are in an area that your pharmacy does not have the current COVID vaccine, again, let one of your account managers know. We may be able to help kind of find a workaround or another pharmacy for you to work with to get the vaccines. I've been hearing from some of our partners in other states that there are some pharmacies that don't have much left. So if you will be traveling or you know you're not up to date or your facility or organization is not, let us know and we can do what we can to give you a hand with that. So
yeah, and I'll also, Jamie, I'll also post the most current up-to-date CDC information in the chat too.
Perfect. Any other questions for Kyla? All right. Well, then I am going to welcome
I'm
on.
sorry, this is LaDonna. I do have a quick question. I just was having a hard time finding my mouse to unmute my microphone. And we just gave our residents, well, we gave them the December one. We were back, I'm going back to the COVID, December, and then followed up with them in 2 to 4 months. Couple late admits, didn't get theirs till May. But I heard you referring to a fall. Does that mean we will be re-vaccinating the residents again this coming fall? Probably would be the recommendation.
Yes. Yep, that is correct. Yep, because they recommended like the kind of last fall one. And then they recommended the spring one, but that was right around April, I believe. And so, yes, they will be recommended to get another one this fall when that is available.
Okay, and then somebody will let us know again when it's out and ready.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So now I'm going to introduce Tom and Natasha from Vive and Health. So Tom, go ahead and share your screen whenever you have it ready and pulled up.
Sure. And just FYI, you have our vaccine program, and that has all the updated guidelines in it. Kylie did a great job. And Ray, thank you for your data. I like that too. But I think that I think you have our community program, but that will have all the updates on it. The newest vaccine, and Kyla probably already knows this, it'll be an Omicron variant. They're just waiting. I think they know what they're going to give. They haven't released it yet. But we also have the new pneumococcal vaccine update. Not to belabor that point, but that's a pretty nice new vaccine that Merck made. And I don't work for Merck or anything, so I'm not giving them a plug. But they did that to compete with Pfizer's Prevnar 20. And so the choice is going to really be between those two, unless there's some variations. But we've got two really good vaccines now for the pneumococcal bacteria. So we'll be talking to you about that and how do you want to launch that. But we're ready to launch both of those and actually all our vaccine programs with you. And then, as soon as you're ready, probably next, 30 to 60 days. So just want to thank Kyla for her presentation. What I want to do is just take a short time. Jamie said take about 10 minutes, and so I'll try and hold it in that time frame. Sepsis is one of the topics that I lecture all over the world on. This is something I've actually lectured on for probably 30 years. And when you look, Ray, at the statistics we have for readmissions and that, this is where it could also be confused like with other conditions like pneumonia. Because typically when someone's readmitted with pneumonia, they often have sepsis. And so what's important for us to do is understand sepsis, not just in the nursing home, but in the community. And I'll show you some examples of that and why that's important for us to look at. This actually is from a paper from Tim Buckman, who is a colleague of mine. And I'm not going to go over great detail, but you could make a case that sepsis is the leading cause of death in the country. And it's often misdiagnosed as something else. And you may have heard me talk about this before. If I would ask you how many people die of COVID, well, almost nobody dies of COVID. What they die of the body's response to the virus, which really is what sepsis is diagnosed as. And so sepsis is really the factor of any infection. If someone is listed as they have an abdominal wound infection, or they have a diabetic wound infection that causes hospitalization, typically that's secondary to sepsis. And so the problem is actually worse than what even like Ray alluded to. And this slide here just shows kind of a cascade of effects of what happens in sepsis. But what I want to focus on is what we have to do is work at the very beginning of this, which is prevention. And you might note that 80% of sepsis admissions into hospitals are due to community acquired. So they don't always get it in the hospital. Matter of fact, that's the minority. And they get it actually in the community and they come in with it. And that's often the case even in nursing homes. So what our job is really to recognize it quickly, but then also make sure people don't get infections. That's where everything starts. And that's kind of what I want to just take a couple minutes with and go over a short presentation. I think it's kind of fun to go through this, but it really goes over the power of the immune system and why we're at risk from our own body more so even than an invader like a virus or bacteria. This is just a quote from William Osler from 120 years ago, when he just mentioned that people don't seem to die of the organism, but they die of the body's response to the infection. It was actually very accurate in what he was talking about. And this jumps ahead another 70 years is when Lewis Thomas wrote an opinion piece in the New England Journal of Medicine where he talks about we have evolved so many defense mechanisms against invaders like bacteria and viruses and parasites that we really kill almost everything. And you can make a strong argument that we're more in danger from our own immune system than we are from an invader. And that's what sepsis is. It's our immune system in many ways is killing us. And you'll see how that happens. I'll show you just a real quick animation here, just kind of point this out. So what you see here is red blood cells, and you see this little black dot. That's a bacteria. And then watch what happens to this neutrophil, which is one of our main lines of defense against an invader. Watch what it does. It senses it's got something different. Usually it can identify this through toll-like receptors on the cell surface. But what the neutrophil is doing, notice it will not stop. It's going to continue to go after this invader until it grabs it, and then it will pull it inside of itself and expose it to a vacuole with a pH of about 6. It will immediately cause it to be destroyed. So that happens all the time, and not just one, but multiply that by millions of times if we get an invader. And let's see if I can scoot ahead to our next slide. This is another illustration. This is from Nucleus Medicine Illustrations. And what this one here shows macrophage, basically, it's a circulating macrophage that is looking for invaders. It'll look for something different, like these green organisms. It'll pull it inside of it. And if it senses that it's different, it releases a series of cytokines. These are inflammatory mediators that will cause an immediate flooding of the area with neutrophils that are designed to kill the invader. And I'll show you this in just a second. In real life, there's no music in our blood vessels. So that was added by Nucleus, so we won't count that. Just want to go over a couple of things real quick. How many of you have ever been eating something you really liked? You drop it on the floor. Question for you is, can you eat it? And I wish I had a poll because I could ask you guys this and see what your responses were. But the answer is, of course you can. Now it's got organisms on it. Whatever is on the floor is now going to be on that food. But our ability to tolerate eating organisms is extremely high. There's only a few organisms really that would kind of hurt us. Now, I'm not telling you, don't walk away saying that Tom told you to eat things off the floor, but you can. And if you have little ones, if you're a parent with little ones or grandparent with little ones, you know, they do all the time. I'll give you an example. This is my grandson, Sebastian, and I was out with walking with him. And I heard him yell. He said, "Hey, Papa, I found a binky." And I'm thinking, oh gosh, don't put that in your mouth. And so when I get there, he's got it in his mouth. And he said, "Don't worry, I cleaned it." He washed it in this puddle. Well, the puddle was a dirty water puddle. I just made things worse. But you think that hurt him? And the answer is no, he was fine. Because there wasn't anything pathologic in what he ate off the ground. Now, again, you always have to ask yourself a question. Do you feel lucky? Because there may be an organism on there that is dangerous. And so my rule is I usually won't eat things if I drop it, unless I'm really hungry, then I will. But the other thing that's more important is this: my granddaughter, when she fell off her bike. And this is far more dangerous because now what happened is she broke her first line defense. And if you think about it, is there anything pathologic right now on your finger? And probably not, but there could be. And would you put your finger in your mouth if I asked you to? And the answer is Probably, because what's the danger? But if you had a cut on your finger, now that's different. And so what I want to do is show you what happens. So this is how the body responds, and I want to show you why this is so dangerous with sepsis. Let's say that there's an organism, let's say this is Staph aureus, and now it's entered the bloodstream. What's going to happen, and you might remember like the cytokines I was telling you about, well, a circulating monocyte will identify this organism as different. And what it does is then release a series of cytokines from interleukin 1 to interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and tissue factor. Now, you don't need to remember any of that. The principle, though, of this is very simple. If you identify an organism that could be dangerous, what your body's first job is to isolate it, contain it. And so what these cytokines do, especially tissue factor, start the coagulation cascade. So factor 8A to 5A, 5A to thrombin, thrombin to fibrin, and immediately we get a clot. And that's great. So normally we get a little clot in an area, and that's going to trap the invader. Now, the problem is our body doesn't like clots. And so if you've had a recent physiology class, you might remember some of these other terms like TAFI and PI. TAFI is thrombin activatable fibrinolysis inhibitor, and PI is plasminogen activator inhibitor. And these are both released to suppress fibrinolysis. And the whole point of that is they don't let the clot get dissolved, because the body will naturally dissolve this clot. So the reason we don't want that clot to be dissolved is we have to kill this invader first. And so this is where the neutrophil comes in that I showed you before. And we don't just have one or two neutrophils. It's like I said, we have millions come. Now, the way they get to that area is they cause the endothelial wall to open up a little bit. And so there's fluid that gets out because the endothelial wall now has bigger holes in it. But that's necessary so the neutrophils can come in through those holes and then attack the invader. And so the neutrophil then will kill almost everything, but our body doesn't stop there. It'll take a little bit of that invader and from the neutrophil. And then this is where it gets so complex, because I'm giving you a very brief overview. A circulating T4 lymphocyte will identify the invader, take that information back to the lymph nodes, and now we're going to create an antibody. Now, an antibody is like a terminator, and this is how vaccines work. It creates basically an antibody that's going to be targeted specifically for that invader. So if it ever comes again, we're ready for it. And the antibody will actually cleave open the cell wall. It's one of the ways that it works, but also makes it more susceptible to a neutrophil attack. So the point being is that our body is incredibly sophisticated and capable of defending against virtually any invader. And now once the invader is destroyed, all of this process down-regulates. Everything goes back to normal. We quit making TAFI and PI. We allow fibrinolysis to take place. We quit causing clots, and everything goes back to normal. This happens in every one of us every day, and we don't even know it. The problem is in sepsis is for some reason, and we can't figure this out, is the process doesn't stay localized. We've tried everything we can, and we're still not close to solving how do you stop sepsis. We thought that in the 1980s, we tried just anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen and high-dose steroids, and those studies all failed. We thought that we might be able to do this by giving an antibody to a specific antigen. That was the HA1A monoclonal antibody study in the early 90s, and that study failed. We've tried literally everything, tried clotting prevention, we've tried to reduce inflammation, and we just can't find a way to make sepsis stop. So that leaves us as clinicians a real problem. And what it means that what we have to do is not ever let somebody get sepsis. And so that gets back to what we are trying to do. Now, in our nursing home settings, we might be able to do some treatments like give fluids. Some nursing homes might be able to give antibiotics. But this gives a very common cause for people to go back into the nursing home or from nursing home into the hospital. Because what happens is this, and this is what we try and teach in our program, and we not just in the nursing homes, but in the community, is if we would have a patient with an infection, and you can apply this to yourself or your family members or loved ones. If you have an infection of any kind, it can be a cold, flu, COVID, doesn't matter. If they have a heart rate that elevates, or an increased respiratory rate, or an increased temperature, or a change in behavior, those are what we call signs of systemic inflammatory response syndrome. Now, these signs aren't perfect, but they're warning that something else is going on. And I'll give you an example. We had a 62-year-old man who came in to the hospital, although the same principle applied to a nursing home. And he had bilateral hip infections, and he was running a fever. He held that fever for a while, but then eventually he started having trouble breathing. Now, if you have a hip infection, why would you have trouble breathing? That immediately is a huge red flag. Why would his heart rate go up? Which it did. And so if you have 2 or more of these signs of systemic inflammatory response, that requires an urgent evaluation of the patient. This is a warning sign that maybe this person is going into sepsis. Now, if you wait until there's something really bad, like if you see a change in behavior, well, that's kind of late. That really alarms me when I see someone who might have been behaving normally, and then they don't want to wake up, they don't want to get out of bed, or they're harder to wake up. Those are really serious warning signs. And so this is why we try in our program, where we make it an interactive scenarios, we put people in scenarios where they have to solve what might be occurring. And it's especially good for nurse homes, but also for the community. And I'll show you an example. But our whole goal is to make, obviously, all our nursing home staff capable, but also the entire public. We as a country can't solve sepsis until our entire communities are aware of what this is. Any infection is bad, but an infection that shows signs of SIRS is very alarming. Keep in mind, we have no treatment for sepsis. All we can do is support the person. And when you get them to when they're really sick, like which is what most of my career was in the critical care units, we're desperately trying to save their life by putting them on ventilators, giving them strong vasopressor agents, giving them fluids, obviously appropriate antibiotics. But in many cases, we don't even know what the organism is that caused the sepsis. So we make a guess and try and give broad spectrum antibiotics. Our job is really tough once they get sepsis. So here's our goal. Let's not ever let people get sepsis. And that starts by making sure infections are prevented. We don't have time to go through our program. And if you want to see our program, you're more than welcome to. Jamie, we can have a whole separate presentation on it. But in our program, what we do is we help really lay people more so than nursing or medical staff. But it works for everybody. We go over what is sepsis in a very short, fun way. And then we put people in scenarios. Does they have sepsis or do they not? So we try and develop some critical thinking around what is an infection, how dangerous is it? But our whole point being is that we want to do everything we can with this program to reduce the incidence of sepsis. Sadly, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We can't solve sepsis. We don't have treatments. To me, it's a national priority that we should be focusing on much more than we are. But we will get there. It's just, we're not there yet. So Jamie, that's a real quick overview. And let me know if you need anything else or have questions.
All right. Any questions for Tom? I know that was a lot of dense information and a little bit of time. We also did have another presentation last month with Tom and 2 sepsis survivors, one out of Hawaii and one out of Wyoming. And I can share links for that recording and their slide deck. Very, very moving presentation, and just everything that those ladies went through. Very scary, and it kind of helps bring in the understanding of how big of a problem this is in our communities.
Tom, I'm curious where you at, and like if I'm in Wyoming and I'm hearing the infection and delirium, right? So that can be a presentation in our dementia community's perceptions of things. So I'm curious if there could be opportunities when we're doing our work in raising awareness about that, because we say, there's 100 reasons why a person might have dementia symptoms, and sometimes
Right.
it's infection. So it's really important you go to the doctor when we see things present. I'd love to talk with you. Maybe we can meet offline and have that conversation about ways that we might collaborate.
Oh, absolutely. Your knowledge of dementia is way, way more than mine. So we would have to work to include that. But you're right. If someone has dementia, that kind of obscures a key warning sign.
Or someone's presenting with dementia, or I
Yeah.
would say too, say you have Alzheimer's disease, or maybe you have a dementia that's not properly diagnosed, but your family has accepted this, and now there's a really extreme acute presentation within that too. It's a medical event, right? We need to go to the doctor because it could be delirium caused by an infection. And I think those things ride really close together, right?
That's a very good point. Thank
Mhm.
you for bringing that up. That's a very good one, Deborah.
Yeah. Thank you. I
I'm
look forward
happy to
working
talk
with
at
you,
any
Tom.
time.
Yeah. You said put your email in here and I'll send you an email and introduce you to our
Sure.
health systems lead. Thanks.
Thank you.
And then Mary, if you want to jump to the next slide, we've got some polling questions. Again, we want to hear from you all. Tom had showed the screen of the sepsis modules that we have available. For our community partners, is this something that you guys would be interested in? We do currently have vaccination modules available to you all, but would you also like to see the sepsis ones be made available to you as well? All right, well, the majority has spoken. I have not seen any no's come through. So I will talk to the powers that be and let them know that this is something that you all want. So give that another minute or so. We've got a little less than half of you responding. Give that a moment to go through. All right. Okay, Mary, go ahead and share those results.
Sorry, Jamie, they were already shared.
Oh, were they? Okay. It must have froze on my screen because it still said the joys when technology works the way it's supposed to. All right. Have you all started planning for your fall flu clinics for vaccines? And I know we've got a lot of people that are in the community, and this fall vaccine clinics are not necessarily something that you hold, but if it's something you are interested in, let us know. Mount Pacific has quite a few mobile pharmacy partners that we would be able to partner with to make this happen in your organization or in your community as well. All right. All right, Mary, I think we're good to go there. Perfect. All right, a couple more questions. I'll go ahead and go to the next one. And then, do you have any mobile vaccine clinics planned for this season? Are you already on top of the ball getting these things planned for the fall? Right. Okay. Close and share. It looks like most of you are not already planning this. Again, let us know if this is something you need assistance on. We can do everything shy of pulling numbers for you all, so let us know. I think there's one or two more. And then, do you need assistance with vaccines? So this is not only setting up clinics, but do you have any individuals that are under or not insured that would like to get some, at least COVID vaccines that you need assistance on? Mountain Pacific has some ability to help with that in some areas as well. Or even just helping educate staff, residents, coworkers, however you need that done, family members. All right. All right, next one, I believe we should be good. Okay, so we've got some upcoming events. Our weekly It's Worth a Shot series is every Wednesday at 2:30 Mountain Time. I am not good at the time zones, so I want to say Hawaii is 4 hours and Alaska is 2 hours behind that. There is a one-time registration link listed there, and we do send out reminders for not only that week, but to let you know what's coming up next week once you are registered. And then in October, we have our final Regional Community Coalition member for this year. So if you want to go ahead and register now for that and get it taken care of, the link is available. We'll also send out reminders as it gets closer. If that's just not in your wheelhouse to remember right now, not a problem. We understand how that goes. And then we've got two community facing sepsis resources. One is a flyer and one is a guide to understanding sepsis. And it definitely sounds like you all want these modules, so we will work on getting that approved and get those coming out for you as well. Mary, go ahead to the next one. And more resources and references for you. Those zone tools and resources, we have them on not only sepsis, but COPD. I think there's a diabetes one. There's quite a few. And if there's something specific that you're looking for on our website, I know it's a little hard to manage around in that. So if there's something you're looking for, let one of us know and we'll find it for you and get it sent over. There's also a resident information booklet for go to the hospital or stay. I've had a couple facilities in Montana that are actually including those in their admission packets now. So that's a great resource to utilize. And there's also a class checklist. If you're not sure what class it is culturally and linguistic available services. A big thing with health equity right now of making sure that you are offering services that are appropriate to the culture in your area. So if you want to start making steps on that checklist is been simplified and it's very easy to implement. And it looks like we've got a couple more minutes. Any questions, feedback, anything you want us to know? Go ahead and unmute yourselves. Tell us what you need from us.
I think the slides will go out after this call. Is that right,
Mhm.
Jamie? We've got
They've-
somebody that's waiting to click those links.
Yes, they are. And if you didn't catch one and you want it right now, let us know. I will put my email in the chat so you can just reach out to one of us. Or if you have an account manager that you know off the top of your head. Oh, there it is. Thanks, Mary. Just reach out and let us know. Kyla put hers in there. I mainly handle Montana. Kyla is Alaska, but we can get you to the correct person if you have a question and you just can't find who you normally work with. We'll get you handled.
Jamie,
Yes.
this is Michelle. I live in Bozeman.
Yeah.
And hi, and I just wanted to reach out. I really liked the early slides, and I remember them from one of the previous presentations on readmission rates, comparing states. I think it's really helpful. But I would love in the future meetings to dig a little deeper into what various states are doing that are having a big impact, so that we don't just admire the data or acknowledge it. We actually explore how we can improve and what the takeaways could be. So that would be an ask for a future meeting.
Perfect. Do you want to hear from just our team, or would you like to hear from facilities or organizations to see what they're doing?
I think that there's great merit both ways. I
Okay.
think looking at the trends is important, and I think finding outliers that are succeeding and finding out whether it's a panel discussion or whatever, what is working, what has been attempted, and even better yet, what is evidence-based that will make the biggest difference. Like if we were to focus in on 2 or 3 pieces, we talked about what are the highest frequency for admissions and readmissions, but ultimately, what are the things that we can, like, I mean, we talk sepsis, which is great, but once a patient is already septic, we're just trying to prevent septic shock. But what are the pieces that we can be looking at in terms of how do we prevent that readmission, and what areas are being successful, and how I think would benefit everybody, whether you're in the ambulatory setting, trying to prevent your patient from going back to the hospital, or you're planning a patient to discharge, making sure that they won't get readmitted.
Perfect. I will see what we can pull up and get that added to the next presentation.
Jamie, this is Kyla. We did have one presentation as part of our It's Worth a Shot series where we highlighted a hospital in Alaska that had implemented a pretty successful sepsis program. So I can certainly send we have a recording of that as well that might be helpful. And then, maybe just continue the conversation like you said.
Yeah, definitely. Michelle, can you throw your email in chat and I can get that over to you?
Yeah, thanks. I guess I didn't mean specifically around sepsis. I guess I was looking at all
Okay.
30-day readmissions and understanding how we can plan to prevent the readmissions. So that was the part I was kind of seeking.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect. Thanks for clarifying. And I will also say, I guess, to add to that, if you dive into individual facility data, sepsis is number 1 for some of the facilities. I know off the top of my head in Alaska. So, if you're in a facility and you really want to dive deeper into your data specifically, since you only saw the statewide data today, please let us know.
All right. Well, all of you, I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer. Enjoy. I know in northwestern Montana, my mornings are starting to be a little cool, which fall is my favorite, so that makes my heart happy. Let us know if there's anything that we can get for you, anything that we can help with. If there's any topics that you think we need to be covering, we will do what we can, find a resource, find a subject matter expert, and get it to you. Other than that, have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so
Thank you,
much.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.